Welcome to Charlotte Dixon, where shadows whisper and the dead remember. If you're drawn to tales that crawl under your skin and haunt your sleep, you're in the right place. Put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and brace yourself. What you're about to hear is not for the faint of heart. It all began with a construction site. Abandoned, unfinished, forgotten by time. Workers whispered about screams in the wind, tools vanishing without a trace, and a sickness that spread like a curse. Then came the patrol car, a barangay service vehicle that returned without headlights, without purpose, carrying something no one could explain. This is a tale of haunting regrets, of secrets buried under cement and silence, and of those who crossed into the unseen and never truly returned. My name is Rule. I don't expect anyone to believe what I'm about to say, especially not those from the city, where ghosts live only in textbooks and horror stories are just entertainment over midnight coffee. But where I come from, in the far southern edges of the Philippines, the air itself seems to remember things people try to forget. And some vehicles, like the one I'm about to tell you about, seem to remember pain more than people do. This story starts with a patrol jeep, an old, battered barangay patrol that should have been retired long before any of this ever happened. They called it Panchito. I was a teenager when Panchito first came to our barangay. It had this strange growl, a low, guttural hum that didn't sound like any engine I'd ever heard. But for the first few months, no one questioned it. We were just happy to finally have a barangay patrol vehicle. Our barangay captain back then, Captain Mangupahan, had used it during his campaign. That's where the whispers began. They said Panchito wasn't bought from any legitimate dealer. It was acquired, a donation from a former mayor in another province whose son was gunned down in a car ambush. They never fixed the bullet holes on the underside of the passenger door. You had to crawl in from the other side or sit on cold metal where someone else had bled out. But it still ran. The barangay needed it, so we looked away. At first, Panchito was just a convenience. It brought sick neighbors to the rural hospital. It escorted visitors and sometimes served as transport for the barangay tenants during patrol nights. But over time, things began to change. The first sign was during fiesta season. It was June, and my cousin Lorenz and I had just come back from visiting our Aunt Molly's place. That's another story, one I'll tell some other time. But that night, we heard the rumble of Panchito's engine outside our window, even though no one had started it. Lorenz looked at me, face pale. "Do you hear that?" I did. A low, coughing growl, like a dying dog trying to howl. No one was in the driver's seat. Captain Mangupahan laughed it off the next morning. "The battery's faulty," he said, chewing his cigarette like it owed him money. "The wires are old. It's nothing." But the engine only roared like that at night, and only when someone had recently died in our barangay. The second death came fast. A young Tanid named Jerson. He used Panchito to deliver relief goods during a typhoon. The roads were muddy, the rivers swollen, but Jerson was always the helpful kind. That night, we heard him honking outside the chapel, long after curfew. Some kids thought it was a prank, but the honking wouldn't stop. It went on for 20 full minutes. When people came out to check, there was no one inside the vehicle. But the engine was still on, and in the back seat, something had clawed deep grooves into the leather, 3 long parallel marks. Not animal scratches, not human either. Jerson was found 3 days later near the irrigation canal. His hands were broken, his eyes, they were open wide like he died seeing something the rest of us were lucky not to. Captain refused to talk about it. "Coincidence," he said. He fell. The brakes failed. But Panchito wasn't repaired. Instead, they blessed it, poured holy water on the seats, and taped a crucifix to the dashboard. That was when things got worse. People in the barangay began avoiding it. Even when it was needed for emergencies, people hesitated. One old lady refused a ride to the health center after suffering a stroke, begging instead for someone to carry her. "I'm already halfway to death," she whispered. "Don't let that demon drive me the rest of the way." We started hearing things. Children said Panchito talked at night. It says names. One of the kids told us. My kuya heard it say Edgar, And 2 days later, Kuya Edgar fell from a coconut tree. We brushed it off. Kids lie. But then, during a barangay cleanup, the engine started again. On its own. No one was near it. The keys were on the captain's table. But the engine didn't just growl, it screamed. The horn blew in short, high-pitched intervals like a signal. One of the Tanids collapsed that day, bleeding from his nose. They said it was just heat stroke, but his blood pressure had always been normal. Then came the night of the funeral. Captain's best friend, Rico, had died. A heart attack, they said. The captain wanted to honor him by escorting his coffin from the chapel to the cemetery using Panchito. The family agreed reluctantly. It was raining hard that day. Everyone was holding umbrellas and candles. I was among the crowd, walking behind the patrol as it rolled slowly toward the hill where the cemetery was. But something felt wrong. The air was heavy, thicker than usual. And Panchito wasn't just driving slowly, it was shaking, like it didn't want to climb the hill. Halfway up, the Jeep jerked, not stopped, jerked like something had slammed into it from behind. People screamed. The casket flew open. What we saw inside still haunts me. Rico's body wasn't there. Only soil. Damp, black, clinging to the satin lining of the coffin. The screams rose louder. Someone fainted. The captain yelled, demanded answers, but no one could speak. Then the Jeep burst into flame. Not a fire that started at the engine, not mechanical. No, the flames came from the inside, rising through the empty coffin, swirling as if fueled by wind from another world. The smoke turned black, too black for something burning, and for a moment it formed a face. I swear, on all I hold holy, it was Rico, but not as we remembered him. This face was contorted, cheeks pulled back, eyes burning, teeth sharp like broken glass. It grinned, and then it vanished. The fire stopped. No one was burned, not even the Jeep. Everything was normal again, if you could call it that. Panchito just sat there, silent, waiting. That was the last time it was used for a funeral. They repainted it, put new tires, even had a priest bless it 3 more times. But the deaths didn't stop. In the years that followed, 3 more Tanids died under mysterious circumstances. 2 crashed while using Panchito at night, and 1 was found strangled near the barangay hall, his fingernails torn off. After that, even Capitan avoided it. Eventually, the barangay bought a new patrol. Modern, quiet, white with blinking red lights. Panchito was moved to the back of the barangay storage lot, covered in blue tarp. But the engine still growled at night. Some say it's cursed. Others say the first soul that died in it never left, and every person it carries must pay part of that price. Me, I think it remembers, like a war horse waiting for its next rider. It doesn't care who. It just wants someone to sit behind the wheel again. And when they do, it will begin again. The old grocery building stood like a hollow skeleton, its bones creaking every time the wind swept through its gaping windows. By the time Bien and his crew were given the renovation contract, it had been abandoned for almost 10 years. The last tenant, a chain grocery store, had vacated the place in haste, following an inexplicable series of events that no one could quite explain. The story went that the manager suddenly disappeared, leaving behind nothing but a blood-stained uniform in the back office. Rumors followed quickly, as they always did, whispers of strange sounds in the stockroom, lights flickering in patterns like Morse code, and canned goods tumbling from shelves without cause. Bien didn't believe in any of that. He was a practical man. He had renovated dozens of places, some even older and more worn than this one. To him, work was work. Still, he admitted there was something off about this job from the very start. The air inside the building was heavy, like being underwater, and no matter how many windows they opened, the scent of rust and old soy sauce clung to every corner. At first, he thought it was just his imagination. But when 3 of his workers fell sick in the first 2 days, migraines, nausea, 1 even fainting, he started to pay attention. Doting, the most superstitious among them, insisted they perform a small offering before continuing. Just in case, he said, they brought native rice cakes, a glass of lambanog, and lit a candle in front of the stockroom where the uniform had been found all those years ago. That night, Everything was quiet, but the next morning, one of their cement bags was ripped open, claw marks clearly tearing through it. Not a clean slice like a rat or knife might cause. None of them said anything, but Bien saw how they glanced at one another, waiting for someone else to bring it up. Later that week, they began hearing it. The knocking, always at 2:14 in the afternoon. Once, twice, 3 times, coming from the sealed walk-in freezer in the back. They hadn't even broken open the rusted locks yet. Bien checked every time. Nothing. The second week, the knocking was followed by a woman's voice, soft and pleading, asking, "Is anyone there? I'm cold." First, Bien thought it was a prank, someone trying to scare them off. But when he stayed behind one afternoon, hiding behind stacks of plywood and recording the sound with his phone, he saw something he would never forget. The freezer door opened on its own, just an inch or two, but the sound was unmistakable. The creak, the groan of metal long and used, and from that narrow opening, a mist slithered out. Bien dropped his phone. By the time he picked it up, the freezer door was fully closed again. When he played the recording, all he heard was static. Things escalated after that. Tools went missing and were found again in odd places. Inside the ceiling tiles, submerged in mop buckets, even once nailed into a wall they hadn't worked on yet. 2 workers quit. Doting refused to return. Bien, stubborn and needing the paycheck, continued. That's when he started dreaming. The same dream, night after night. He was in the grocery store, but it was no longer abandoned. The shelves were full. Bright lights buzzed overhead. Shoppers walked quietly down the aisles, their faces blank, their clothes stained. All of them turned to him at once. No one spoke. They just watched. And then, from the loudspeaker, a voice. His voice called out, "Clean up in aisle 4." He always woke up sweating. Bien didn't tell his wife right away. He knew she'd worry, but when she saw the claw marks on his shoulder, deep, angry red scratches he couldn't explain, he had no choice. They tried to bless the place. They invited a priest from a nearby parish, but he only stood in front of the grocery for a moment before shaking his head. "There's something old inside," he said. "Something that doesn't want to leave." In desperation, Bien reached out to a local albulario. The man came with little fanfare, only a bottle of coconut oil, a string of prayer beads, and a gaze that seemed to pierce through the veil of the world. He walked the perimeter, sprinkled the oil, muttered incantations. When he entered the stockroom, he stopped cold. His lips trembled. "This isn't just haunted," he whispered. "This place was a mouth, fed on pain. Someone died here slowly over days, trapped, forgotten, and now it waits." They didn't finish the renovation. Bien broke the contract, forfeiting the payment. He didn't care. A week later, the store caught fire. No source could be identified. It simply erupted one night, and the flames consumed it entirely. By morning, there was nothing left but ash and the scent of burnt meat. Bien moved jobs, then towns. But some nights, he still hears the voice, soft, pleading. "Is anyone there? I'm cold." He keeps his windows shut now. Every time he hears a knock, he checks the clock. If it's 2:14, he doesn't open the door. The vacant lot that once lay forgotten beside our barangay became, slowly and surely, a magnet of quiet dread. The construction site, once brimming with laborers and laughter, now stood still like a photograph paused mid-motion. No more hammering, no more concrete mixers humming, just silence, except for the occasional whistle of wind brushing through the jagged rebar, rusting under the elements. Started subtly. The old man, who had mysteriously appeared when the land was being cleared, was never seen again. No one knew where he went. Some said he left town, offended. Others, mostly the old women in our street who still clung to rosaries and worn-out novenas, claimed he was never alive to begin with, that he was the spirit of the land, displaced and disrespected. And when the machines dug into that soil, they unearthed not just stone, but a slumbering wrath. My name is Jacob. I was 12 when the house construction stopped. My curiosity got the better of me, and every afternoon after school, I would climb the low perimeter fence to peer inside. Tools were scattered as if the workers had dropped them mid-task. There were plastic cups still half filled with stale coffee and lunch containers never reclaimed. One day, I swore the nail gun fired on its own. Just once, a solitary pop. But when I looked around, no one was there. Neighbors whispered that the foreman had been found unconscious on the second floor, with his eyes wide open, staring at nothing. He was breathing, but he couldn't speak for days. When he finally did, all he said was, "There was someone buried in the walls, smiling." Rumors spread like wildfire. The project was officially halted. The owners who had financed the house never returned. And by Christmas, the site had been officially abandoned. Children were told not to go near it, but we were kids. Warnings only made it more inviting. It became a game, daring each other to stay the longest on the property. It was simple. Step over the rusted gate. Stay 5 minutes. Get out. My cousin Rafi was braver than all of us. He stayed 10 minutes, returned sweating and pale, refusing to tell us what he saw. That night, he had a nosebleed so bad his bedsheet turned scarlet. The next morning, his voice was gone. Then, one by one, others in our street fell ill. Not with coughs or colds, but strange conditions. A boy from 3 houses down had his skin peel off in long strips. Doctors said it was an allergic reaction, but to what, no one knew. An older man who worked near the site started mumbling during the day and shouting at night. His family took him to a hospital in Manila. He never came back. I tried to forget about the lot, about the half-built house. But then, something happened to me. It was a Sunday morning. I was walking to the Sari store when I noticed something strange through the gaps of the construction fence. A figure, sitting on the second floor balcony. An old man, legs crossed, rocking slightly. I froze. I could only see his silhouette, but I knew it wasn't a trick of the eye. He looked right at me. He waved. I blinked. He was gone. I ran back home, breathless. Told my mother, who slapped the fear out of me and threw a rosary around my neck. That night, I dreamt of the man, not as a ghost, but as something else. His eyes were empty, but he kept smiling. He opened his hand, and inside it was my school ID. I woke up screaming. That week, the barangay captain called for a general meeting. A decision had been made. The house had to be demolished, not just abandoned, destroyed. We watched from our windows as backhoes and demolition crews arrived. Everyone held their breath. As the machines started their work, an eerie scream rang out. It wasn't metal on metal, it was human. A wail so agonizing it silenced the birds. Then the machine stopped. The engine died. The workers refused to go near it again. Later, they found something buried beneath the foundation. Not bones, not remains, but a patrol vehicle. An old, rusted barangay patrol car, with shattered glass and bloodstains on the seats. No one had any idea how it got there. It had been missing for over a decade. I heard one of the men whisper, "This was supposed to be in the vacant lot beside the hall. Why is it here?" No one had an answer. That night, the sky over our barangay turned black. Not dark, not cloudy, black, like ink spilled across the stars. And in the silence, from the direction of the demolished house, we heard the engine of a car start. But there was no one there. We never saw that patrol again. Some say it drives the road between our barangay and the next, only appearing to those who disrespected the land. Others say it waits, deep beneath the soil, humming softly, its lights blinking in the dark, waiting for the next foundation to be laid. It was the kind of heat that made your sweat sting as it rolled down your back. The air in Subic that day felt thicker than usual, not just because of the sun, but because of what I knew I was about to do. My name is Sam, and I had kept this to myself for more than a decade. I never wanted to be associated with that place again. But something about what happened there, in the room with the rusted beds, never stopped whispering in my head. And today, I'm finally putting it all out there. Back in the early 2000s, I was just a lanky teenager with nothing better to do than chase ghosts with my 2 closest friends, Jan and Negi. Both were Philams like me. Our parents either worked on the base or once did. We were the leftover kids of the US military era in Olongapo, with nothing but rumors and rusted buildings to inherit. The place we always came back to was an abandoned American barracks near the old naval hospital. They called it the Red Hall because of the color of its walls, faded to a pinkish rust now, and because of the bloodstains someone said never fully washed off the floor. We thought that was just urban legend stuff. But even then, the air was too cold for a place with no electricity. Jan had a key he said he found in a box under his father's bed. It looked official, Navy issue. He swore up and down it belonged to the building. One Sunday afternoon, just before dusk, we brought flashlights, snacks, and a little cassette recorder. Ghost hunting, we told ourselves. We were ready to spook each other with whispers and screams. Maybe record a few sounds and laugh about them later. What we weren't ready for was room 17. The room didn't even have a number on the door anymore, just the faint outline of where the plaque used to be. The door was slightly open, unlike the others, which were either locked or rusted shut. Jan pushed it with the end of a broomstick we brought. Creaked open like in every horror movie ever made. And just like that, we stepped in. There were 6 beds, 2 of them overturned. The others still had the bare steel frames standing like skeletons. One bed had old leather straps hanging off the rails for restraining patients. The walls had patches of peeling green paint, but under the layers we saw markings. Scratch marks, deep, human-sized. Negi turned on his flashlight and pointed it at the ceiling. There were words etched into the concrete. "I'm still here." The flashlight flickered. We thought it was the batteries, but we had just replaced them before entering. Jan laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood. He walked toward the corner where there was a pile of soiled, old linen. He poked it with his foot, and out tumbled what looked like a hospital bracelet. Still intact. Colonel E. Hartley, it read. We froze. Hartley was the name of a man whose photo was in a newspaper clipping Jan once showed us. The colonel who died in mysterious circumstances, locked in his own ward after reportedly going mad. The article said he burned alive in one of the barracks. That's when the smell hit us. Burnt hair, rubber, and something metallic. We turned to leave, but the door had shut. Not slammed, it was as if it was never open. Pulled, Jan pushed. Nothing. The doorknob didn't even rattle. Negi backed away toward one of the beds, trying to keep his cool. That's when the bed frame beside him began to screech. Slowly, almost shyly, the metal frame moved about 3 inches on its own, dragging rust across the cement floor. Negi screamed, dropped the flashlight. Everything went dark. I turned on the cassette recorder in my hand, half out of fear, half to convince myself this wasn't real. Then came the footsteps. From the far corner, past the overturned bed, something heavy walked across the room. 1 step at a time. Drag, step, drag. Jan whispered, "Someone's in here," but we were alone. I dared not speak, but I turned toward where the sound was coming from. There, in the beam of the flashlight Jan managed to recover, was a boot. Just one boot. Military, blackened at the heel. The kind issued during the American occupation. The boot took another step. No leg, just the boot, marching. Negi fainted. Jan was praying under his breath. I held the recorder close, and that's when it happened. A voice, deep and cracked like dry earth, came out of nowhere. It said, "Hartley never left. You brought him back." I screamed. The lights from the flashlight exploded, and we were thrown back against the beds as if something pushed us. I felt the straps around one bed tighten around my wrist, even though I never lay down. My back hit the metal bar. Couldn't move. Then silence. Pure, raw, unnatural silence. The door creaked open. Jan dragged Negi out. I struggled, kicked, and the strap came loose. I ran, my ears ringing, my heart slamming into my throat. Outside, the sky was no longer twilight. It was night, but when we checked our watches, it had only been 15 minutes. 15 minutes in room 17 felt like a lifetime. We never spoke about it again. Never returned. Jan threw the key into the Subic River. Negi transferred schools. As for me, I sleep with a rosary under my pillow, and I never record anything on cassette again. Even today, sometimes I hear the dragging boot, somewhere near my room, especially when I'm alone, especially when I think too hard about what really happened that day. And when I do, I remember the voice. Hartley never left. You brought him back. My name is Sam, and as I mentioned, I've never told this story to anyone aside from those I truly trust. And even now, I'm still afraid it will follow me if I share it. But I believe stories like mine deserve to be told, especially when the shadows haven't let go. My mother used to work in Subic, back when the American bases were still active. That's where she met my father, a US serviceman who, after several months of whirlwind romance, decided to bring her back to the States. But something happened, something terrible. He died in an accident before they could leave, and my mother, already pregnant with me, had no choice but to stay. She never remarried. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she didn't want to. We lived not far from the abandoned military base, and while she did her best to give me a normal life, the presence of the past always loomed like a curtain of smoke you couldn't wave away. As a kid, my friends and I, Jan, Negi, and a few others loved exploring the base. It had long been deserted, its buildings slowly consumed by vines and moss, its walkways cracked and uneven, and the walls covered in graffiti and strange symbols we didn't understand. One summer afternoon, when the sun was low and the sky turned an amber shade of quiet, we stumbled upon a part of the base we hadn't seen before. A steel door, rusted and half covered with creeping vines, was slightly open. Behind it was a tunnel that sloped downward. We looked at each other, half terrified and half excited. Jan, ever the bravest, took out his phone flashlight and went in first. The tunnel smelled like mold, old oil, and something faintly metallic, like blood. The deeper we went, the quieter everything became. Even our footsteps felt muted. The only sounds were our breathing and the occasional creak of metal groaning under age. We emerged into a vast underground room. It was filled with boxes, old military crates, and rusted filing cabinets. Everything looked untouched for decades. There were papers with strange symbols, maps that didn't match any current geography, and photographs, black and white ones, of people staring directly into the camera with wide, unblinking eyes. Then we found the chair, in the center of the room. Just one chair, bolted to the floor with restraints on the arms and legs. And around it, a series of concentric red circles drawn or painted onto the ground. There was writing in chalk in a language none of us could recognize. Jan laughed it off, said it was some kind of military ritual or hazing room. But I wasn't laughing. I felt something there, like the air had weight. Negi threw a rock into the far corner of the room, and we all jumped when it clattered against a metal cabinet. We giggled nervously, and that's when the light on Jan's phone flickered. "Battery's dying," he muttered, but it wasn't. He had just charged it before we left. Then my flashlight died too. So did Negi's. Total darkness swallowed us whole. We stood in the pitch black, hearts racing. Then we heard it, a dragging sound, from the far end of the room. Slow, deliberate. We froze. Jan whispered, "Who's there?" But no one replied. Then a deep, guttural moan echoed through the chamber. We ran. We didn't even think, we just ran. Our hands reached out, slamming into crates and walls, stumbling through the darkness. Somehow we found our way back to the tunnel. The light outside was blinding. It was dusk already. We didn't talk much after that, but the dreams started soon after. Mine were always of the same room, the same chair, except this time someone was in it. A man in uniform, but his face was obscured by shadows, like a smudged photo. And every night he turned a little more toward me, closer and closer, until one night I woke up screaming because his eyes were inches from mine, black and glossy like polished stones. Jan disappeared 2 weeks later. His parents said he went out to buy soda and never came back. His bike was found near the base. Negi stopped speaking entirely. His parents pulled him out of school and moved to another province. I've never seen him again. I started getting sick, not just physically, emotionally, spiritually. I would find muddy footprints leading from my bedroom to the bathroom. Sometimes there were handprints on my mirror, and at night, whispers came from under my bed. One day I went back. I know, I shouldn't have, but something told me I had to. I brought holy water, salt, a crucifix, anything I could think of. I walked the same path, opened the same door, and descended into the same tunnel. But the room wasn't there. Where it once was, the ground had caved in. All that was left was a hole that descended into complete blackness. And in the distance, I heard chains clinking. That's when I ran. I never went back. But here's the thing, 2 weeks ago, I passed by that part of the base again. Just out of curiosity. The door was sealed, welded shut, and someone had spray painted over it. Do not open. He still sits. If anyone knows what that means, please, don't go looking for answers like I did. Because sometimes, when I walk alone at night, I still hear the chair creak. I'll never forget the day Mark asked me, out of nowhere, "Daddy, why does the white lady look at me?" It had been weeks since we left that cursed abandoned housing unit. Weeks since I bandaged the cuts on my arms from smashing through the window in a panic. And still, Mark was speaking to someone I couldn't see. That question, spoken so innocently, cut deeper than any glass ever could. After moving into the cleaner's quarters, I thought we could finally live in peace. The woman who gave me the job, Aunt Gracia, was kind and kept to herself. She never questioned our past. The room she gave us was cramped but safe, or so I thought. The first signs came at night. Mark would talk in his sleep, not just mumbling. He would carry on full conversations in a whispering tone, answering invisible questions. I tried recording it once. All I could hear was Mark's voice. But at one point in the audio, there was a faint hiss, like someone breathing through clenched teeth. Then came the dreams. I began waking up in cold sweats. In my dreams, I saw the same abandoned housing unit, the one with the door that slammed shut by itself. But in my dream, the door never slammed. It stayed open, and something came crawling out. It didn't walk. It didn't even glide. It slithered, its arms too long, its head tilted to one side, as if broken. It smiled with no lips. Its eyes were like holes in a paper mask. And always, it said the same thing in a croaky, childish voice. "You shouldn't have left me." I stopped sleeping much after that. Mark, however, became more withdrawn. He used to be cheerful even when we had nothing. But now he barely smiled. He spoke less, drew strange pictures, figures without faces, or doors with shadows behind them. One day, I found him whispering to the wall, his fingers tracing invisible symbols. I tried to ask Aunt Gracia if she noticed anything strange. Her face turned pale. "You didn't stay in the abandoned compound near Q, did you?" she asked. I nodded slowly. She crossed herself and whispered a prayer. Then she told me the story. "Years ago," she began, "those houses were built for company workers, but one of the units was different. It had been built on top of an old, forgotten burial site. They didn't know until a child died inside during construction. A support beam collapsed. His body was never found. Rumors said the land swallowed him. The workers didn't talk much, but one of them, an old mason, refused to return. He said the child's mother performed a ritual to find her son, but what came back wasn't her son. Some said she conjured something else, something that took her place and stayed in that unit. That's why no one wanted to live there." My knees buckled. That was the exact house we'd stayed in. From that night on, everything spiraled. One evening, I came home from work and found the door open. Mark was missing. I searched the quarters. Nothing. Panic rising in my chest. I ran down the road back toward the direction of the old compound. There he was, standing at the gate of the very same housing unit we swore never to return to. His hand was on the rusted latch, his face blank. "Mark!" I yelled. He didn't react. I ran to him, pulled him away. His body was cold. He kept whispering, "She's calling me. She said you left her behind." That night, I finally made the decision. We needed to leave the city. I couldn't explain it to anyone. Who would believe me? I didn't even believe myself half the time. But I knew one thing. The thing in that house had attached itself to my son. and as long as we stayed near, it would never let go. I packed up what little we had, took a bus to the province, found a small barangay near the mountains where no one knew us. The first week was peaceful. Mark started smiling again. I began sleeping more. There was a chapel nearby. Every day, I lit a candle. But peace doesn't last long when you're cursing. One day, I was sweeping the yard when I found a piece of paper by the gate. A drawing, crude and childish. It was our old house, the cursed one, drawn in black ink. And inside it, by the door, stood a white figure with long arms. And beside her, a small boy. Both were smiling. I asked Mark about it. He said, "She gave it to me. She wants us to visit." I burned the paper, but that night the dream returned. This time I was inside the house. The walls bled. The ceiling pulsed like breathing skin. And from the corner of the room she rose, pale, burnt, neck twisted, as like empty bowls. "You brought him to me," she rasped. "Now I can follow." I woke screaming. Mark was standing by the door, facing the wall, whispering again. "I don't know how this will end, but I'm writing this down, because if anything happens to me, maybe someone will know the truth. Maybe someone will understand that some doors, once opened, never truly close. And sometimes what waits behind them doesn't want to be alone."